good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet taking place on Wednesday, the 13th of March in the Town Hall in person, with some officers joining online. So we'll start in the usual way with apologies for absence. I'm only aware of one loss of apologies, which is Councillor Nigel Chapman. Anyone else's apologies we need to note? No, don't think so. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay. And we don't have any addresses and questions from members of the public or councillor addresses on any items for decision on the Cabinet agenda or councillor addresses on neighbourhood issues or items raised by Cabinet members. So that takes us on to scrutiny reports. And as this evening, we unfortunately are not able to have any councillor or officer from scrutiny with us, and we have responses to all of the scrutiny recommendations on the agenda. I suggest we just take those items with each of the reports that they refer to. So we can therefore move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 8, and that is a request for exceptional circumstances relief from the Community Infrastructure Levy, and that is Councillor Louise Upton. We're also joined by David. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, so this paper basically is here as a result of the very good news that BMW have decided to site their new production line for the electric version of the Mini here in Oxford. And we have recently granted them planning permission for a very large bespoke factory building where the cars will be assembled. Now, planning permissions normally attract a community infrastructure levy based on the square footage, which is money that goes into a central pot out of which we can draw for various infrastructure projects. Now, there is a route to an exemption from this levy, which BMW have chosen to take. And because it is for such a large amount, it triggers the Subsidy Control Act, which has very strict criteria about the circumstances under which this relief can be granted. So we have taken legal advice on this, and both BMW and our council officers agree that this request meets those criteria. So they have provided evidence from various qualified professionals that determines whether the economic viability of this factory would be at risk if the sill charges were levied against them. Now, we could refuse to grant this, and this is where we've had to make a bit of a judgment call, bearing in mind that the way the car industry works is that countries pretty much have to compete to host these factories. And of course, alongside that, we do this because it brings jobs. It brings jobs not just in the factory, but in the supply chain around it. And our central government, national government, are giving almost £80 million subsidy to this to ensure that this electric Mini factory comes here. And we are being asked here to also help to ensure the future of the Cowley plant here in Oxford. I don't need to tell you that the car plant is a massive part of our local economy. It's been associated with Oxford since William Morris bought the site back in 1912 and began manufacturing Morris motors. And I don't think that we could risk BMW deciding to move this electric Mini line elsewhere. So what I'm asking everyone to vote on in this Cabinet report is to approve the recommendation that we do award discretionary exceptional circumstances relief for the community infrastructure levy charge on the BMW Mini plant, which is a very large sum. It's £832,421, which is a lot of money for us to forego. But weighing up the small chance that they would choose to not come here if we don't do this against the absolutely catastrophic consequences of them deciding to do that means I think that we have to, or we should, agree to grant this exemption. Thank you. I don't know whether David would like to add anything to that.
And I should have said that Lorraine and Lan are also joining us online. So thank you, and please do indicate if you'd like to say anything. David, over to you.
No, I think Louise has covered that very eloquently, so happy to take any questions, and like I say, Lorraine and Lan will take the difficult ones for us.
Oh, noted. Okay. Has anyone got any questions or comments? Ed.
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, three quick reflections. One is, I think, this has been the subject of some quite detailed viability work, and obviously, the scheme is in deficit. So I think that's clear, and I think that takes us to the second point, which is we have a policy that we apply here, and the terms of that policy have been met. And so, while Louise, I think it's absolutely right to emphasise the kind of discretionary nature of this, and the fact there is, as you say, a judgment call. It is underpinned by policy and evidence. The thing I was just going to double check, of course, part of the catastrophic impact of a decision by BMW not to remain in Oxford would, as I understand it, be also around business rate liability, would it not? So in addition to many other bad things which would happen if our car plants were not there would also be really quite, I think, one way or another, and depending how the government, changes business rates in the future and when it does a reset and so on and so forth, there would also be financial repercussions, I think, one way or another.
Yes, thank you, Ed. And I could see Nigel Kennedy vigorously nodding online. So I think he was definitely concurring with your views on that. Any further comments or questions? No? Okay, I mean, I think we have had fairly extensive discussions about this as we have kind of worked our way through the process. So thank you very much, everybody, for the work on this. And I know it has, as Ed says, been a really big piece of work. So that being the case, can I therefore move us to the recommendations, which are to approve them and authorise the head of planning to then make any necessary minor corrections and then write it with the outcome to the claimant as required. Is everyone happy to indicate that they support the recommendations? Thank you very much. Louise.
There was just, we haven't mentioned the scrutiny reports that we thought we would take with this.
Yes, there's anything specific that you wanted to pick up from the scrutiny reports at this stage?
I think there was only one thing, which was one of the scrutiny recommendations was that we engage with the BMW to say, hey guys, we've done you a big thing. Big favour's the wrong word, but and would we engage with them? Would they now engage with the council to see how they might in other ways help support the local community? And I just want to say that conversation has started already with officers, and the BMW do appear to be very open to that. And now that we have made this decision, then I think we will go back to them more to try and firm up some commitments from them.
Yes, thank you. I think that is an important point to pick up, and I know that BMW are keen to do their part for the local economy beyond providing jobs and employment. And we will work with them on that. So thank you for mentioning that, Louise. Great. Okay. I think we can now move on to the next item. So thank you, Lorraine, and thank you, Lan, and thank you, David. The next item is the allocation of preventing homelessness budget. And Linda, over to you on this one. And I think we're joined as well by Richard and Ossie. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, this is a report which comes annually to Cabinet, and it's a report that I'm always pleased to move, because I think it really sets out the scale of everything we do as a city council in this area. And we've got an ambition that nobody should have to sleep rough on the streets of Oxford. Unfortunately, there are some people sleeping rough, but what people don't see is all the people who've been helped off the streets and who've been stopped having to sleep on the streets because of the services in Oxford that we've got access to and that we provide. And as I said, the scale of it, a lot of people don't realise we've got access to over 400 units of supported accommodation to help people who might otherwise be at risk of sleeping on the streets. So it's £1.65 million that we're allocating this evening. Most of that, almost £1 million, is now spent through the county-wide alliance. which commissions some really important services for us, like the outreach team, like the beds in O'Hanlon House and in dispersed beds across Oxford, and also the Somewhere Safe to Stay service. And this report touches on changes which will be made to the Somewhere Safe to Stay service because of changes to government funding requirements. That DLUC have said they will no longer fund beds in communal settings. Floyd's Row, where we've been providing the Somewhere Safe to Stay service, is no longer suitable for that purpose. But what is important is the service, not the building, and the service will continue. We've got money being spent in O'Hanlon House to introduce some extra capacity there, so there will be new beds in O'Hanlon House which will be part of that service, and it will also be provided in properties across Oxford in a dispersed model. So thanks to those changes with the Somewhere Safe to Stay service, that is also reducing costs of the cost of providing that service, which means that the Alliance, the County-wide Alliance, is able to continue providing what it's been providing for the last few years, despite rising costs. So as well as those county-wide services, there's also a lot of there's other money which is being spent just in Oxford on key priorities for us. A large chunk of it on extra beds at Matilda House, run by A2 Dominion. And when you look through the list, you'll see some really key services there that I know, are really part of the fabric of provision in Oxford, have been for a long time, and which are really valued. So I'd like to give a shout out to the Porch in particular, which we're able to fund again, who are doing a great job in East Oxford, providing meals and support for people sleeping rough, but also people vulnerably housed, and the Gatehouse as well, which does a great job in St Giles and has lots of people volunteering there to support their work, and again do a great job supporting people, not just people still sleeping rough, but ex-rough sleepers as well. So yeah, that's all I've got to say about it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Linda. Really comprehensive introduction to the report. Would either of you like to add anything? See, please.
Okay, so I'd just like to add, thank you, Councillor Smith, for summarising the report. Obviously, this preventing homelessness budget at City sits within a much bigger context, like Councillor Smith said, operating within, making sure we meet the objectives of the county-wide strategy. So obviously, a lot of all our commissioning partners in local authorities and county are now contributing to the Homelessness Alliance to deliver a range of services across the county. And that also obviously helps what's happening in the city. So with looking at this budget, we're taking very much that into consideration, what that funds and what is provided when we've made the decisions what we should fund this year, taking into consideration not only the beds that are needed for people to come off the street, but also making sure that there's a lot of support for people to, when they go into accommodation and move on from support accommodation, that there is that wraparound services so people can recover from homelessness in the longer term. So, yeah.
Sorry, I've just managed to switch my microphone off. Richard, did you have no? Fine. Are there any questions or comments on the report? I mean, this is Louise.
Just to comment that this really is probably the most important work that the council does, actually stopping people becoming homeless. And I think we should all be incredibly proud of the huge amount of time and resources that we put into it, and just think about the many lives that have been significantly improved because of it. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd also like to say that it is really welcome that for the last few years we have been able to bring people, all the councils together with this pooled budget, because I think that has made a really big difference. And it used to be quite hard work in order to sort of try and get the necessary funds for people to fund some of the people from their own authorities who ended up in Oxford, and it is good that we are now able to do that. So Thank you very much indeed for the work. Sorry, Ed, I can see you as well, but I'll take you in a second. I just wanted to say thank you very much for the work that you do. I mean, it is, as Louise said, really, really appreciated. And Ed, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And it was really good to hear as well about the county-wide approach. I mean, there have been moments in the last sort of decade when it felt like the wheels were going to fall off that wagon. No one's life has improved that. So I just got a nagging note. Have we ever used any of this money to support discretionary housing payments? I got a memory that we used some government funds to sort of top it up, but I might just be misremembering, and I might be thinking of a different pot of money. Just in the light of some of the pressures that we're seeing in terms of people being asked to leave private rented accommodation, I just sort of wondered about that.
So not in the last few years, but it may be in the past. The DHP pot this year actually is quite healthy. We always have a bit of a top up from the HRA to support council tenants, but on top of that, this year we've had a large contribution from the county council. I can't remember what the fund's called, but it's to do with the cost of living grant that comes down from central government, and that's been passed on to top up the DHP fund this year. In a healthy position this year, but it'll be, we're having conversations at the moment about will further funding come through next year from the county again, so yeah.
Nigel, I don't know if you wanted to comment on which pots of money we've used, but I'm not sure it was this particular pot of money, but
I know what it is.
you know what it is, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Nigel's on mute as well. Nigel, do you want to do the honours, or should I? But we're on it. Yeah.
Yeah, as Richard said, we have used this pot of money in the past, basically, and for this year we had some money from the housing support fund, basically via the county council. Actually, let's top that up. So I think for this year, together with any allocation we can get from the HRA as well, I think, Richard, we're probably okay for this financial year. But going forward, as Richard said, there are discussions again with the county council as to whether they'll allocate some more money for next financial year as well, basically. So
Thank you. And Linda, do you want to just address the scrutiny recommendation as well, which was that the council carries forward any underspend in SWEP funds for the next financial year. And I think we have responded in part to say that we agree in part.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to the sort of the written reply. I mean, we'll spend any money where it's needed, and if we're given permission by Nigel Kennedy, you know, if any underspend, we'd like to carry over to the next year if there is any. But in year, you know, it will be spent where needed.
Yeah, thank you. Right. In which case, I think we have probably. Oh, sorry, Mark. Sorry, yeah.
Which is 2,500, so it's been reduced because there has been an uptake. So on rough calculations, let's just say £40 a month, 450 a year. Is that like something like 5 people using the leisure service now? How does that work, the 2,500? How many people are using the leisure services?
The number I can come back to you with. Obviously, I know the amount, but I can come back to you because there's only a certain amount of, I think you get a membership for a certain amount of periods, so not for a whole year, but I think it's for 3 months. But yeah, I can certainly come back with that in writing.
Yeah, I mean, just on that, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I mean, it is just a small amount of money. I mean, it is being taken up. I have to say, it has been successful. I mean, that £5,000 figure was put in there, you know, when we first sort of thought about this scheme as a figure plucked from thin air. And as Ossie has said, you know, it's not a monthly ongoing membership. It is a limited membership, you know, and after that, people can go on to the bonus scheme, you know, which at the moment is just about £20 a month, isn't it? You know, if they're on benefits, if they want to carry on using the facilities. But it is a small amount of money, just £2,500. But I think it is really important. Well, we've got our Executive Director for Communities here and our Cabinet Member for Leisure as well. Obviously, there's discussions ongoing with Serco at the moment about the new contract, and I think it's really important, you know, if possible, that we get this baked in to that contract, so we can continue having this offer for people experiencing homelessness in the city. I mean, it'd be great if we didn't have to have this £2,500 in this budget next year, because it's being taken care of as part of the contract. But I'll leave you to take that forward, Chewy.
I believe discussions are ongoing, as they say, so well, more soon. Great. Okay. Well, I think we have probably reached the end of the debate on this item. So there are quite a lot of recommendations, 6 of them. So I'm not going to read them all out. You'll be delighted to hear. So can I just move the recommendations on behalf of Cabinet and ask you to endorse them in the usual way? Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you very much, Richard and Lucy. That takes us on to item 10. Which is, so I get my various different bits of paper. Who have we got on this one? Dave, online somewhere, I think. Yeah, there he is. And Linda and Ed, I've got both of your names on this. Who's leading off? Linda.
I mean, I think this is a very straightforward report, hopefully, pretty much a technicality. It's about there's a small parcel of land within the railway lane development that's already within the ownership of the council, and this is about moving it from the general fund into the HRA fund in order to bring it forward for the development of affordable housing. And this scheme is 100% affordable. I may as well mention this while we're on the topic. 90 new affordable homes, 47 for social rent, 43 for shared ownership. So yeah, this is just one of those technical things that needs to happen in order for us to be able to get on with the project and deliver those homes.
Yeah, thanks very much, Linda. Ed, anything to add? No. Dave, did you want to add anything?
Oh, thanks, Chair. Just to say, yeah, as Linda outlines, it's quite a technical sort of small issue, really, but it's the council part of this larger site is probably about 5%, but there's a sort of a marriage value in bringing our land into the scheme. It makes for a much better scheme and provides for a few more houses. So the positive news is we're wanting to make this appropriation just in advance of signing formal legal agreements, but we're mobilising now, discharging planning conditions and expecting to start in earnest on the site in July, and that'll be an 18-month build period before, well, we'll get the 90 homes in 2 phases over that build period. So it takes a while to get to this point, but it is definitely on the way now.
Good, and we are very pleased indeed about the scheme. So thank you very much. I think as this is largely a technical report, in order to make the scheme happen, I can't imagine there's going to be a huge amount of debate or questions on it. So can we move to the recommendation, which is to agree the appropriation? Fantastic. Thank you all very much. We are now on to item 11, which is the regeneration of 38 to 40 George Street. We are joined online by Carrie, it says. Yeah, there I can see Carrie. And Ed is here to move the report. Ed.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is also, I think, probably at the more technical end of the scale. We're aware of our really good scheme at 38 to 40 George Street, which will provide a new apart hotel, hopefully relieving some pressure on Oxford's housing market, particularly the short stay sector, which we've had a lot to say about recently, but also provide a new community space. That sounds vague. That's because it should be quite vague, because the idea is really to co-produce ideas with local groups, local community, and the partners of our developer there are really engaged in bringing that forward. So that's going to be really positive. We obviously are working up, or rather our developers working up what can be done within planning. And what that scheme might look like. And this recommendation really is to give ourselves, if we need, a financial envelope up to our budget to then support the scheme. So we don't know yet exactly what scale of building will be possible, and of course the exact cost thereof. And so it makes sense to give ourselves the option, if the business case is right, to spend the money. We've already got the money in the budget, so what this does is it will enable us to spend our budget rather than, if there's a business case, rather than not spend our budget in spite of a business case, which would be a less good place to be. That is my attempt to summarise it. There is a confidential appendix for those who would like to refer to that. I'm not sure, and if people want to debate it, obviously into confidential session we'll go. And I'm sure if I've said anything which needs expansion or which is wrong, Carrie or colleagues will be able to correct me.
Yep, and I should have noted as well that Jane is here as well. So Carrie and Jane, do either of you have anything to add? Carrie?
No, that's a fair summary. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, and we've got Carolyn here as well. So we are yeah, we are well endowed with people able to answer complicated questions should anyone have any. I'm not seeing any, however. And oh no, sorry, I speak too soon. Councillor Joe Munkonge.
Thank you so much, Ed. When I was looking at the report, I was alarmed when we were asking for the additional capital. Then just to clarify, and I think this is a good point in paragraph 3, why you are requesting the increase in capital is because you want to get more out of the building. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Well, that's why I like a question that's answered by the person who asks it. So excellent. Okay. In which case, this is effectively a largely technical report. Are people happy to agree the recommendation, which is to delegate the authority as set out in the report? Everyone happy? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carrie, Jane and Carolyn. Thank you, Ed. We are now therefore on to item 12, which is the Oxfordshire Food Strategy, City Food Action Plan. And we have Hagan by Zoom, and we have Louise to introduce the report. So Louise, over to you.
Thank you. So long-standing Cabinet members and of course our massive loyal online following of these meetings will remember that we endorsed the Oxfordshire Food Strategy itself back in June 2022. And then this paper is setting out the more difficult bit, which is the action plan to underlie the warm aspirations that were in the food strategy. So it has several strands within it, really. I think possibly primarily it's about helping people in food poverty. But it's also about moving people to eat more healthy food. It's also about binding communities together through getting them to participate in growing food and in sharing food. And it's also about reducing the carbon footprint of the food that we eat. It has a combination of actors in it. It's a multi-stakeholder partnership, which was called the Food Action Working Group with the awful acronym of FORG. So those stakeholders, only one of which is the City Council. There are lots of other institutions involved, some of the Oxford colleges, for example, but also the food banks and commercial enterprises. Good Food Oxfordshire itself is sort of the anchor of it, really, but community groups, local food producers have all been involved. We've had about 8 meetings. I've been at most of them, and our council officers have been at all of them. And that's officers from a variety of different teams, from our communities team, from our sustainability team, possibly, and the planning team as well. And they've come up with this, with the action plan. Now, some of those are actions for us within it, and some of these are actions for the many other groups and things that are involved. So sometimes we'll play a leading role in an action, sometimes we'll play a supporting role. You will see from the report, I think that, I'm looking at you, Hagan, on screen there, but we've done an awful lot in this space already, helping set up the sort of community food network and with the community larders, providing fridges, training volunteers, etc. And a lot of the good model that we set up, particularly during the pandemic, I think has now been replicated across the county. But it's also been smaller things like supporting families to access Healthy Start vouchers. So lots of really good things in here. And I think we were really keen that they were actually, as I say, it wasn't just the warm words from the strategy, that these were actually things that we could achieve, the things that we can measure that we have achieved, so that we can be sure that we really are addressing the problems. So there we are. I commend it to you. I think it's a huge amount of work from Hagan and other officers who've been involved with it. So please endorse it.
Thank you very much, Louise. Hagan, do you want to add anything at this stage?
Thanks so much, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Upton, for a really comprehensive overview of the report. All I'd also just add is that individually, the district councils across the county are doing the same process at the moment. So it's going to all of their, equivalent cabinet meetings across this period. So we're in the mix of that. And there might be one or two odd bits which come out of that where we look at opportunities that happen across the county. So we're keeping just a brief eye on that in relation to that as well.
Thank you. I think, Louise, it might be worth just addressing some of the scrutiny recommendations because there were a number, 5, I think, altogether. So I don't know if you wanted to pick up any of those. I mean, I don't think you need to go through all of them, but if there's anything in particular you wanted to pick out. Well, in the meantime, let me take questions and comments. So, Ed.
Yeah, I thought the responses to scrutiny were sort of clear and good, but there's a bit of a fly in the ointment, or is it a hair in the soup on this? I don't know. Council passed a resolution some while ago about the sort of right to grow and support it, and undertaking a mapping exercise about where there could be community growing. And of course, that plays into this. I think I should be candid with Cabinet colleagues. This is proving really quite difficult just in terms of resourcing the work. I think with hindsight, probably, and upon reflection, when Council debated it, we should have recognised there would be a cost to this, realistically, in terms of staff resource, and at the moment that just isn't there. What I've suggested to officers and what might be an approach, I think we need to do something, because I think there was a council motion and council would rightly expect that. Is perhaps bring forward a note to our cabinet looking at the very least what could, sort of thing that could be done and the resource that would be needed, so that then, if council chose to find that resource in the budget process, something like that, we could look to take it forward. And we could probably, give a bit of an overview of other things happening in that area. There might be some community pilots, that sort of thing. As I say, sort of memo for self, probably, in a way, is that when councils get these things, we need just to be quite clear about when there are going to be extra pressures. What I don't think we can do, and I feel really strongly about this, is simply say to the communities team, or to the zero carbon team, or to the property team, or to the planning team, here's an extra significant thing on your in tray. Just let's see what else you're going to drop, but we're not going to give you any extra resource, because I think that wouldn't be fair, and I think other things would drop off the list. I mention that because I think it is really quite relevant on the food item, Susan, although it's not directly on this report, and I feel like we should sort of be open about that.
No, thank you. I was thinking exactly the same thing, and I think it would be unsurprising for it to be raised on this issue. I mean, I do hope, notwithstanding what you've just said, Ed, that there might be, when we get that cabinet report that does sort of like look into the kind of possibilities, there might be some, what you might call easy wins, where we can identify some places and ways.
Low-hanging fruit, Susan, was the word you were looking for.
Sorry. Enough with the puns. So. Oh, I'm not exhausted now. Yes, so that we could perhaps, offer up to people as at least some ways to experiment with how we might be able to go forward on this. But I think the bigger project, which I think Council was talking about, was a really detailed mapping project right across the city, and that I think is definitely proving very difficult to resource at the moment. Louise, if you would like to address both that, if you wish, but possibly the scrutiny points.
Well, first of all, on Ed's point about on the mapping exercise, there is a new person in the I think they've been housed in the planning team that Anna's particularly excited about because they're very techie, computer-based maps, who has a PhD in this subject on mapping, and therefore may be able to more easily than we anticipated, perhaps be able to do some kind of mapping exercise. I think I had a little chat about this with Hagan, and who was going to, I think, I was going to try and engage with this person and see whether there's a way we could do this more easily. But you're absolutely right. We don't have, Hagan is not sitting at home twiddling his thumbs thinking, what can I do this afternoon? I know I'll go out mapping areas we can plant potatoes in. That aside, yes, but again, obviously, as usual, Scrutiny come up with some really good suggestions. Some of those that we've happily will take away and try to do. The couple that we have said no to, it's not because we think it's a bad idea, it's because it would be resource intensive. So the idea of collecting food waste from large generators of food waste and distributing it among food larders, that is a great idea, but that would require quite a lot of resourcing, and we as a council do not have that spare at the moment, although, you know, if it became possible, then of course we would try that, and we will perhaps work with partners to see if anybody else could do that. And I think that's also probably the case, particularly for recommendation 4. 3 and 5 also, that we've just said in part, it's partly because we think that actually what they're suggesting is already really in the report, is already really, at least the spirit of that is already written into the report. I think, is that, Hagan, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in relation to a couple of the other actions that came out of scrutiny, they're within the report. So it's at least partially or mostly on one of them.
Thank you very much, Hagan and Louise. And I think that, sorry, Mark, I'll take you as well. Can you put your mic on, please?
And Bart, Jess and Fiona at Good Food Oxfordshire, who've put the time and effort in over the last couple of years to make sure that co-production with all the districts, you know, obviously including the city councils as well, we're here now. And again, it's co-production at its best, and all the volunteers, our community champions who've been leading on some of the schemes as well. The only thing going forward that we have to be careful about as well is with our food larders is sometimes about processed food. The important thing is to make sure people have food, but with the supermarkets handing over too much processed food, at some point we need to look at this collectively and give it actually that, you know, we'd rather have more healthy options, because there's a lot of processed food going to the poorer people, and we know what processed food isn't good, and it will be a public health issue.
Yeah, I think very valid points, Mark, absolutely. And I think it's also about trying to make sure, and I think as in the food strategy, that we're not undermining good quality local shops offering good quality products for sale through free food, and that's always been something that we've had to bear in mind as well. So it is a really fine balance at times, and one that we just need to constantly keep an eye on. Good. Okay. Well, some really good work here across the whole county, and some very good work for the City Action Plan. So can we agree the recommendations in front of us? But before we do, sorry, I just wanted to say, I think we should add a recommendation that we bring forward a report to Cabinet addressing the issues that Ed was talking about, because we have effectively said that we would do that as part of the council motion. So we have to address it in some way. So can we add that into the recommendations? To look at a feasibility. So, well, to bring a report back to Cabinet, which is what you would normally expect anyway as a result of the, I mean, to be honest, it should be happening anyway as a result of the council motion, to discuss how we're going to address the council motion. I think you've said you're already doing the work with Hagan to see if there's anything that we can do on that. And it may be to say that there's a lot of it we can't do, but we need to address the fact that we were asked to do it by council. So anyway. with that addition, can we support the recommendations? Thank you. Okay, we are now on to item 13 on the agenda, which is the voluntary adoption of the socio-economic duty. And this is my report, and I'm very pleased to be making it to Cabinet. So this is something that we've been sort of talking about and thinking about for quite some time, as a result of a number of different suggestions that have come forward from various different sources, including the Child Poverty Review and amongst other things, and that scrutiny carried out. The Equality Act in 2010 set out the possibility, effectively, of setting such a part of as part of council's work, and some councils have subsequently adopted it, and we haven't up until now been one of them, although anybody reading our reports will see that there are a number of different equalities impacts set out in the normal way in our reports. This report is effectively recommending that we add socioeconomic factors to those report implications that we add at the end of our reports. But, and this is the big but, it's really important that it's not just seen as a sort of tick box exercise, that it's something else that we just tick at the end of the report. And it was equally important that it didn't become an incredibly onerous task. So what this report sets out is sort of the fact that we want there to be a clear checklist in terms of the way that we approach this. But this is the sort of start of the process. We are recommending to council that we do go along these lines because we think it's really important. We know there are huge inequalities in our city, and it is really important that we're trying everything that we can to bring the life chances of everybody in the city to where we would want them to be. And so we want to try and measure that, and we want to try and make sure that everything that we're doing is addressing some of those inequalities and trying to improve things. So this is the first stage, and then there will be sort of subsequent stages where we actually start introducing it into reports, into the work that we do as a council. But at the moment, this is basically setting out, this is what we want to do. And hopefully people can agree with that. Both Mish and Lucy are here to address any additional points and to answer any questions. So I will hand over to the two of you if you would like to add something.
Really just to add, so the operationalisation of this subject to the Cabinet decision would start effectively straight away. We do have some pieces of work to do to look at exactly how we incorporate this into the equalities impact assessment in all of our reports, and also, for example, the data sets that we use as proxies for poverty so that we keep it simple to administer. So, for example, benefits entitlement, which is already a measure we use when assessing how much people pay to access our leisure centres, might be one of those proxies. We also have some geographic signifiers through the indices of multiple deprivation, which might mean that if you've got a project in one particular bit of the city, which is in that space, it would get an extra weighting. These bits, once they've been designed, and the work that we did discussing with a number of other local authorities up and down the country, which have introduced this, were all variants of the same thing, which is using these tools and trying to find a way that you could then be quite clear, any officer, what the impact would be, positive or negative, in terms of the socioeconomic duty.
Thanks very much, Mish. Lucy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, just to add that as part of the horizon scanning, we did engage with our own staff and our own colleagues, and because we knew there was some trepidation of, oh, this may just be another tick box exercise. It's going to increase our workloads. So we've already listened to that and started embedding a change in culture that actually it's part of doing things just in a different order or a different way. So again, doing it better. To try and reassure staff that it's just a different way of thinking, not necessarily increasing the workload or an additional task. And I think that message is getting across quite well. So hopefully we'll reassure those that will need to do the doing once we've got our systems and processes in place.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Your sound was a little odd there, but I think we got it. So thank you very much. Right. Are there any questions or comments on this? No, I'm not seeing any. So again, I think this is something that we've discussed a number of times over some period. So thank you very much for the work on it. And I think it has been important to try and learn from other places that have adopted it and to try and get the balance right for us as we move forward on this. So that being said, can we resolve to voluntarily adopt the socio-economic duty? We can. Thank you very much. That takes us on to our final report on the agenda, which is the Integrated Performance Report Q3. And Ed, over to you to introduce this report. And we've got Nigel joining us online.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I was reflecting on what to say about this one. I mean, obviously, it's a report to the end of December, so things to some degree have moved on. But I think there are a couple, rather than going through blow by blow, I think there are some themes. I mean, one, unhappy theme really is that it's challenging, and that there are some areas where we're seeing overspends. Or in particular, in terms of the general fund and HRA, and we also are seeing some slippage in the capital programme for a variety of reasons, some which are good reasons. I think on the general fund, there's a note there about housing services and the temporary accommodation position. That reflects the position at the end of December. The position, I think, as we are aware, has worsened, and we I think set out to the interested public in recent times that we were seeking anything with ministers to address that. We're doing all the lobbying that we can through our various representative organisations and individually. That is a very, very difficult position. And of course, when we look at a forecast overspend of £1 million on the general fund, the £900,000 on temporary accommodation forecast here, and I think that's only going one way. Is a very big part of it. There are then some other sort of variations. I think another one which I think is quite interesting and relates to one later as well, is around staffing overspends in the contact centre. And then later on, we also see that the volume of calls hasn't been reducing; it's been increasing. And when I look at, and that was on the performance section, when I sort of put those bits together, I just think actually this is a time when local government, local people are under some stress. It's not surprising in a time when we're seeing more homelessness presentations, by finding it harder to accommodate people. We see more calls, to talk about housing, for example. It's not surprising in a cost of living crisis, we're getting more calls in about the council tax, that sort of thing. So it's a time when some of those core council services, I think, are just under particular strain, and that manifests itself both in terms of then our performance targets and our desire to, for example, reduce the number of calls in, but also the budget side of things. And then a further and probably a final reflection on this as well is that when it comes to making savings, we've had an ambitious programme in recent years. We've identified and delivered a lot of savings. Quite often what we'll do is set out a programme over several years. And inevitably, whether you're looking at new savings or a programme, that just becomes that bit harder to deliver everything. And so I think, we have a dual job really, don't we, in setting our budgets moving forward. Part of it is about implementing the new savings. We've got a couple of difficult ones to work on implementing going forward, but also, for example, the work around our staffing structures remains an ongoing challenge that we really need to look at. And there's a breakdown here of the savings. And if I'm reflecting comparing to reports of this nature a year or two ago, I think probably that a little bit more of that list is, if you like, red rather than green, that it's harder to implement. That wouldn't surprise anyone. I think that reflects the context that we're in. So I suppose there's a message here, which is, rather like we've been saying at budget time, significant pressures on our budget, particularly coming from the housing area, significant, if you like, operational stresses, need to keep focused on delivery of savings, and also, of course, delivery of the capital programme. That's fairly gloomy, and I've not done it blow by blow, but sort of at the thematic points that leap out to me. Nigel may well want to add. Nigel's shaking his head. He doesn't want to add anything. So there we go.
Okay. No, well, thank you very much, Ed. And Nigel, you definitely don't want to add anything.
No, I think nothing further to add, Chair. Thank you. I think Ed's said it all really, but happy to take any questions.
Well, thanks very much. I mean, I think certainly when it comes to the capital programme, we can see that what we're facing is also what a lot of other organisations are facing as well, in terms of reprogramming their capital programmes in the light of some pretty difficult circumstances for capital works at the moment. But I think the one that keeps me awake at night the most at the moment is temporary accommodation costs. And I think that, which is why, as Ed already referenced, we're doing a lot of lobbying around that, because the implications of that are both terrible for people as individuals, but also pretty bad for us as a council in terms of the finances as well. And that's not a great combination. Okay, anybody got any questions or comments on this report? No? Okay, well, in which case, can we note the report? I think that is what we are asked to do. Yep, we are. So is everyone happy to note that report? Thank you very much. That is the last report on the agenda, but before you all whiz off, we have got the minutes to look at. So they're on page 303 to 308 of your agenda. Can we agree them as an accurate record? And has anyone got any matters arising? It's two different questions, wasn't it? Sorry. Can we agree them as an accurate record? Yes, good. And I'm taking it that no one has got any matters arising because no one leapt forward. In which case, I just need to remind you the dates for future meetings, and we have one meeting left this municipal year, which will be on the 17th of April. So thank you all very much. Meeting is closed.